Welcome back to another episode of Insights with Experts, where we aim to encourage and foster discussion, learning, and creating an informed global community. To view this and other interviews in detail, head over to theITU.org, linked in the description. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe to our channel for constant updates. Enjoy the episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Insights with Expert. Today, we're glad to be joined by Rahul. Rahul is currently a program officer with the International Telecommunications Union under the UN. How are you today, Rahul?
Doing great, Jonathan. Thank you for the invite. Hi, Daria.
To jump straight into the first question, I guess, could you share a bit about what the ITU does, its mandate under the UN, and I guess why it's so important for ICT and communication for people around the world?
So ITU is the United Nations Specialized Agency for Information and Communication Technology. Not many people know, but it's the oldest UN agency that has existed, which was founded back in 1865 when it was known as International Telegraph Union. And so eventually it got into the UN family as a specialized agency for the ICTs. And there's a very specialized work that we do in terms of, and it's governed by the three different sectors that work within ITU. And they are called ITU Standardization, ITU Radio Communications, and ITU Development. These are the name of the three sectors, and they have three different mandates. So radio regulations, the fact that you are able to take your phone and go anywhere, and then you still have roaming and you're able to enjoy the services. That is done because all the spectrums that is being used, the governments and the industry holders, they come to a consensus on what spectrum is to be used for what purposes. So 900 megahertz is used for GSM telephony, and so it's a very specialized branch of radio communications that is governed by the ITUR. The same as when Elon Musk, for example, launches a satellite into space. It has to go through an international regulatory filing. And so that's also done at ITU. So that's specific work done by, there are a lot of other mandates also, but I'll not get into it. Then there's ITU T, which is standardization sector, and it ensures interoperability of technology so that we have more standardized architectures under which the technology can operate. And then we have ITU D, which is the development sector, which is committed to connecting the world. So funding the projects that seeks to boost the connectivity infrastructures of least developed countries, for instance, and many other, ranging from cybersecurity to enhancing accessibility. And it's the only UN agency with a private sector membership also. So in addition to 193 member states, we also have close to 900 sector members from private companies, from academia and associations.
Touching a bit about what you said about the standardization of the different frequencies and stuff. So I guess as the UN agency, as the people sort of negotiating and reconciling the differences between all the different stakeholders involved, how do you negotiate a set of standards? How do you go to country A, country B and say, follow what we say? Is it just because of the power of the UN or what?
So essentially, we are somebody who brings all the important stakeholders together. We ourselves are basically providing the mechanisms and tools for the different stakeholders to come to consensus. So this is basically the industry members, basically in the standardization sector. It's the technology, it's the private companies that are leading with innovations. And then obviously, if we were to live in a world of proprietary technology, it would be a very messy place. And so it's in the company's interest also in terms of having their proprietary technology standardized, because then there's more, it's more inclusive and more accessible. But then we ourselves basically broker the standardization aspects between different stakeholders through study groups, for instance. And so within the study groups, everybody puts on their agenda and how they would like the standardization process to go ahead.
So during the first question, you mentioned the three subsections of the ITU, and we wanted to know a bit more what you specifically do and what do you do under your capacity as the program officer for the ITU, and which out of the three sections do you work in?
Mm-hmm. So I wear different hats based on the kind of work that I do at ITU. So one of them is with Conference and Publications Department, where I'm leading the digital transformation initiatives of the publishing, because publishing itself has undergone a lot of changes. And we are basically also going to adopt new tools and technologies so that we can better serve our membership. In addition to that, I'm also in the client relations. So basically the person who is the interface between the UN organization and the member states, their focal points. And the different countries, they have different requirements. We also have this flagship annual event called ITU World. And this event is the only event which is open to members and non-members alike, which is organized by ITU. And the different countries, especially from the emerging countries, they like to take advantage of the opportunity that we provided them. And then they bring the startups and the technology companies that exist in their countries, and they kind of showcase their technology ecosystem in their countries. And every year we organize this event in different parts of the world. And so we also make an outreach to different countries so that they can better showcase, because a lot of the countries, especially from the emerging parts of the world, for example, South Sudan or Malawi or Madagascar, they rely on this inclusive platform that the UN provides for them to showcase the development that they've had in the recent past, which is not available to them for, let's say, a Silicon Valley event in California. So that's one of the work that I do in terms of getting these countries to participate in the Telecom World event. And so Digital World this year takes place in Hanoi. Now, whether it's going to be a physical or a hybrid, we don't know, but it's from 12 to 15 October at Hanoi. And the government of Vietnam is also a co-host of this event, within which we also have the SME program, and that seeks to support these startup communities. And so we have series of master classes, and then we have pitching sessions. We recognize the most leading startups in 4 or 5 different categories that we have identified with the help of the member states. And they are connectivity, e-health, digital finance, and smart cities. And because of the COVID, we have also added, because we saw that there's so many startups that are pivoting to ed tech. So education technology is also going to be one of the categories for the startups from these countries that I mentioned to participate. So you may have seen a lot of these Silicon Valley companies coming and pitching, but then it's extremely satisfying when you see a startup from South Sudan or from Kenya that have come up with some sets of solutions, and then they're also pitching and and then we try to provide them with visibility, get them the investors community to directly make a deal with them, or some of the other partnerships that we can offer to them.
So you mentioned a little bit about the different things that you do in terms of negotiating for startups with the conference and other stuff. So I guess what is a day in the life of a program officer of the ITU look like? Or I guess what does your day look like in terms of what stakeholders you talk to, countries, startups, or whatever?
Yeah, a typical day would be just going through your regular emails and finding out what are the deliverables for the day. It can range from having a conversation with a member state on their requirement to working with a startup, for example, and asking them what kind of support do they require. From the member state itself, different countries have different areas of focus. For instance, I remember that I was working with IMDA in Singapore, and they wanted to work on the impact of artificial intelligence on society. And so we basically got started on that discussions. And I remember this gentleman, Mr. Charles Chu, and some other gentlemen, we were in close discussions and trying to figure out what kind of discussions would be the best. And then what we do is that we bring these different stakeholders together. So some of the thought leaders from different industries, a cybersecurity expert, a head of regulator. And so they all come together to discuss certain topics which are of interest to the member states. So a big part of what I do is basically kind of understand the areas of focus and priorities for the different countries and the different companies. And so as UN, the only UN agency with a private sector membership also, so we also have a lot of conversations with the different companies and trying to understand where the companies are trying to put their focus areas on. Like sometimes they have certain issues, and which can be addressed by getting them face to face with the regulators, so the regulatory bodies. So that's also something that I help companies do through this event that I mentioned to you. So they sign up to this event, and then they try to find out what are the right sets of people for them to address their concerns and issues to. And so a big part of my work goes into this assessment of the different issues that the companies and member states have, and how we are better placed to address them through the event itself, through the ecosystem of ITU members.
So we focused a lot in this interview about your job and your current position in the ITU, but we'd really like to know, what was your journey like before that, and how did you actually come to the position that you are in now?
Mm-hmm. So for me, working at the UN was always a dream job because of the kind of family that I come from. My dad was a government servant in India, and so that's where I was born and brought up in Nepal as well, partly. Uh, but then, so from early age, I knew that I would like to get working in the UN, but also I did not realize that I would start working in a UN agency at the age of 27. That's when I entered, and it's relatively younger age to start your career at UN, because generally the ideal career path that I've seen, some of the people that have been working in the UN is that you spend, 5 years, 10 years in the private sector, set up your network, have your expertise in certain fields, and then join UN, because then the UN requires the expertise that you're bringing to the table. So my journey has been that I did telecommunication engineering in India, after which I was recruited as a graduate engineer trainee by Nokia Siemens Networks, and I worked there for 2.5 years, and then I worked at Ericsson for 6 months, and then I quit my job to pursue master's in business administration. So I have a marketing background, and then that led to another job that I did not take, because then I got a 5-month short-term contract with the UN agency that I work for. And getting in UN agencies are generally quite difficult, because the employment opportunities do not open up that easily. So I was very lucky to have that opportunity of 5 months. And then, there's no expectations of renewal, but then you work hard, and then you try to, prove your mettle. And then it got recognized, and then I got a fixed term contract with the UN. So
You
You
mentioned,
mentioned that.
sorry,
Oh,
go.
sorry. I just wanted to follow up on that question. You mentioned that working in the UN was a dream of yours, and I think it's a dream for quite a lot of people. It's a very big organization that does a lot of good to the world. So I wanted to ask, what would be some of your tips to getting into that kind of position, or what certain things should people be doing, especially in university, to sort of lead up to that?
Sure. So what I would recommend is to become a specialist in certain fields, because at the UN, obviously I'm speaking on from my experience of ITU, but I'm not really an ITU representative at the moment. But what I can recommend is to have an expertise in certain fields, because then depending upon the different UN agencies, they rely on expertise of the people who are joining and participating in the different discussions that are taking place in the UN. And so a leading epidemiologist, or a leading, like a architect, for example, or like, so regardless of what domain you are in, because UN is just a platform for different experts to come together. And as long as there's an expertise for the people to share, there's a lot of platforms where they can contribute.
What do you think is the difference between working for a normal company versus working for an IGO or a specialized agency like the ITU? Does it feel different? Does the actual job seem different? Or do you just take it like a normal job?
It's definitely, I mean, the novelty wears off once you start working, and then, you spend, so like for me, it's been 7 years. I still am very, very motivated. I feel extremely blessed that I work in an organization that is serving the needs of the humankind in terms of connecting them. That's the whole mandate. So it really feels different in the sense that you're not working to increase a shareholder's profit, or you're not working for some rich business tycoon who's swelling his coffers because of the hard work that you're putting in. And so that is extremely gratifying, because then it kind of gives you a sense of purpose of what you're doing. But then in addition to that, I think the fact that when you work here, you have people from different countries. It's an extremely international environment. You have this amazing diversity of people and culture, which is really fascinating. And I don't think that any other organization or domain can provide that.
You mentioned a little bit about the diversity of people. Pre-COVID, were there a lot of traveling opportunities for the ITU?
I mean, there are different travel opportunities, depending upon what kind of project somebody's involved with. So in my specific case, I cannot speak for ITU, but at least in my case, we organize an event, right? The ITU World Events, and they take place every year in different parts of the world.
Hope you're enjoying the episode so far. To learn more about Orakui as well as more information about our upcoming episodes, don't forget to follow our socials for constant updates and education content. Links are always in the description. And how does the communication work between sort of different people from different backgrounds?
Yeah, so that's a great question, actually. What I could say is that at the core, you realize that regardless of different cultures and different backgrounds, we are quite similar. And there may be some cultural sensitivities which may affect, the interactions between people or groups. But then I have not seen that to be that big of an issue, at least so far. Uh, as long as you are, considerate and mindful of other people and their, and what their cultural background is, it becomes very easy. But then having some information on the culture itself of the people who are working with you would be very, very useful. So if you have a colleague from Saudi Arabia, then obviously you wouldn't want him to or her to go to a restaurant and offer a pork, for example, because that's not right. Or if you have, yeah, so these kind of like sensitivities are, we rely on everybody to be accountable and be mindful. And that has really helped us. Of course, a good leader also enables that in terms of fostering the teamwork and collaborative attitude, regardless of the differences that we have in terms of nationalities and the socioeconomic background that we come from or the culture that we have. So that has not, in fact, that's a blessing rather than, a problem, because then we come up with a lot of different sets of ideas and approaches that would not have existed otherwise.
Going back to the start, you mentioned a bit about how part of what you do includes organizing conferences and then working with startups that pitch and present there. So I guess the question is, how does ITU fit in and react to new technological innovations, right? How do you test it? How do you find out it works? And if it does, then what is the next step? Do you just go to all the countries and says, hey, you should adopt this new technology? What does that look like?
So we are not an advocacy organizations, or we are not one of them. So what, as I mentioned earlier, what we do is basically bring all the experts to the table and then let them figure it out, what they want to do, what kind of technology they want to push forward, what standardization strategy they would have. We give them the tool sets required to come to a consensus.
As an expert in the field, kind of more of a creativity question, what would be something that you want to see come up in the future? What would be some innovations or initiatives that you would like to see yourself come up in the near future from people?
I would really encourage all the people who are working in different organizations to become more digital savvy. For far too long, we've been relying on emails, and it's very frustrating to see that a lot of organizations, they are not able to take advantage of all these amazing collaborative tools that we have. And so there's an element of creativity involved here as well, in terms of finding out what's the right application to use for right purposes, right? And so you have like these different tedious workflows, and you have extremely convoluted ways of doing things, which can be really simplified by adoption of right tools for the right purposes. And sometimes I feel like organizations, they can have more efficiency if all the people who are working there can agree on common sets of tools which are the most relevant ones for specific purposes. And so that is something that I wish can come up more often in organizations. And the organizations who do that, they are really very nimble and agile, and they can move very quickly to the moving requirements.
I just wanted to quickly move back to sort of your journey and as an expert, maybe you could give some advice to the people that are listening. Our main sort of target audience is mostly students in high school and university. So maybe some tips on extracurricular activities or internships that would be useful to have before coming onto a job, such as working for the ITU or the UN.
Yeah, one advice that I can give is basically seek as many internships as you can. I mean, I think sometimes there's this, some of these students I've seen that they are very focused on specific career that they're trying to develop. So they end up taking internships in the same kind of organizations. And I would advise against it. So if you have done an internship in an ad agency, followed by an internship in a consulting firm, followed by another one in development, I think that really gives you a well-roundedness to the kind of set of skills that you can develop and then later on apply when you work in different organizations. So that's one of the advice, to kind of increase the diversity of companies where you've had experience, not just if you're, let's say you are interested in a development organization. So does that mean that you would have internship only in development organizations, even when as a student you have a chance to intern in organizations that are not development-led organizations? So yeah, and of course, other than that, it's that hustling attitude. I think that's also very, very useful, because of course you're going to get a lot of rejections when you're applying to different kinds of jobs, especially in international relations area. But having said that, how quickly you can raise from the rejections and actually apply again and try to learn from the mistakes and all of that. So that attitude is extremely important. I think I would say that that attitude is more important than the set of skills or the merit itself that you have, because it's that not unwillingness to give up that will really take you places.
Thanks for listening in. This podcast has been brought to you by DeSare, a platform designed to bridge the gap between the youth and professional. You can read more about us at desare.org, and you can also check out the section titled Insights with Experts, where you can submit your questions that you might have for future experts and industries that you would like to learn more about. And you can also refer in any experts that you might know yourself.